So in studying your CV and your background, I was very impressed to see how diverse everything is. You studied, if I understand right, in Oxford.
Yes.
You made, at least this is what the Wikipedia says about you. You made a fortune in Nigeria. And then you started a company which all of us hoteliers adore, Six Senses.
Right.
But more, Six Senses was, if I understand correct, and please correct me, was more of a, almost like a chain. And now you're back to where it all started, at your property.
Yes, no, thank you. Thank you. So yes, I mean, to answer some of the points you've made and your question about Six Senses as a chain and going back to pure properties, yeah. So yes, my background was quite diverse. I was born and brought up in England, but in fact, when I was 6, my father took me to Nigeria. So it wasn't myself who made the fortune in Nigeria, it was my father. He was very successful trading. And many years ago, this was when I was 6, nearly 50 years ago, the Minister of Trade and Industries in Nigeria at the time, Nigeria's strategy at the time was import substitution, unlike Asia's economic miracle, which was about lowering tariffs. So the Minister of Trade said, we're not just going to raise tariffs on tomato-related products, which you account for 90% of all imports into the country of, we're actually going to ban it. And so you've got a year to build a tomato factory and producing all these tomato-related products, you know, the purees, the cans, you know, whatever you get in tomatoes you normally find, and a farm. So you spent a year in Nigeria and I spent 6 months there. And so I spent 6 months where I was educated by this teacher in the local village, and I'd go by donkey to the village. So that was a little bit of a further diversity of my education.
But maybe that's why slow life means a lot to you today.
Right, yes, no, exactly. I learned at 6, yeah. No, so quite a diverse education. And then Eve and I ended up in the Maldives, and we built up Six Senses. And coming to your question about Six Senses being a chain and Soneva being more back to one property, I think the key difference is with Six Senses, we were managing other people's hotels, whereas with Soneva, we're the owner of our hotels. And I think that's the key point of difference, because I find that luxury, even in hospitality, has become quite institutional. So you'll see that with luxury goods, you'll go to a famous road in Munich, you know, or you'll go to you know, other cities or airports, and you'll see all these names of people who are once passionate about making a handbag or a watch or a jewel or a dress, and now all of these names belong to a few companies, and it's the same with these hotel brands. You know, people who are once passionate about creating a message, and now most of these hotel brands are, you know, the founders are long gone, and they're owned by institutions which have many brands in their portfolio and where they're managing other people's hotels. And I felt Six Senses were going that way. So the idea of Soneva, by being both the owner and operator, we can have a very
true luxury, and it's hard to copy true luxury and have it on various properties available, although you may set up a great standard as you did with Six Senses and then grow it. So individuality is key of luxury.
I think when you're the owner and the operator, you can have a clear philosophy that's not diluted. When you have third parties who are owning properties, they obviously are spending a lot on their hotel. They want to have a say as to how the hotel feels, how it looks, some of our policies. So I think by going back to Soneva, where we're the owner and operator, slow life is much truer because there are no compromises.
Well, you know, 20 years ago, maybe 20 years ago, luxury and sustainability did not go together. It almost excluded each other. You know, when somebody talked about sustainability, this person certainly didn't have anything to do with luxury. Now, you proved everybody wrong. You started many years ago, and you said there's no true luxury without sustainability. And today, everybody looks at Soneva, everybody looks at you and says, look, the guy was right many years ago, and is now going. How important do you think sustainability is from a customer point of view today in the world of luxury?
Right. I think there are still a few people who believe that if it's sustainable, it can't be luxurious, especially in some of the newer markets, the digital economy markets. which we're starting to see emerge in our destinations.
Right.
But once people come here, we completely convince them that that's not the case. And I believe that people are going to be more, what's the word? I think people are going to accept this view more so going forward, because the point we were making 20 years ago was that the context of the rich have changed. So historically, the rich or the wealthy or the people, the successful people who could come and stay with us were rural, living in the countryside, fresh air, fresh food, space, privacy. Today, because the world how it is, there's greater urbanization. So 70% of the world is now urban. And so what they want is what we can offer by being more sustainable. Because in an urban context, luxury is essentially that which is rare, that which is new, but which is still true, which rings a chord in your heart when you, when you try it and you taste it and you feel it. And so it's essentially that which you don't get every day. And with our typical guests being more and more urban, what we offer by bringing them back to nature and highlighting the beauty of nature rather than, how do you say, sealing them away from it. There's quite a lot of resorts will protect them and seal them from the nature and the beauty. They'll have this beautiful air-conditioned restaurant with a famous designer and a branded chef who's opening his 50th outlet. And that will be, for them, considered luxury with a lot of marble and gold and air conditioning, etc. But if you live in an urban environment, you get that every day. So the rarity is for the sandbank to be the restaurant, dinner on a sandbank, and for the chef to create a meal that's as exceptional as if you had it in this air-conditioned restaurant or back home, to have that quality of food, but in this remote setting. And that becomes the rarity. And essentially that's what luxury is about. Experiences that are new, but also true, which touch your heart. And so I think, and quite often they're the most sustainable because they're taking advantage of the nature that we live in, whether it's the telescope and seeing the stars through one of the largest telescopes in the Indian Ocean, or having the salad that was plucked fresh from the garden that morning, or watching a movie where the stars are not just on the screen, or having a shower where you see the full moon whilst listening to the hotel's Bose sound system. You might be the richest man in Germany, living in Munich or Berlin, but can you do that every day? You can't if you're living in an urban context. And that.
Your thoughts of sustainability and seeing that it plays such an extraordinary role, not only in your resort, but in your life. Let's talk about your resort for a minute. Please take us back in history. How did it start and how did it grow? How did you develop it to one of the finest properties in the world?
Right. Yeah, so we opened officially in '95. Eva and I first came to the Maldives. I was studying at university up at Oxford at the time. English universities have long holidays. You only have to be up at 3 times 8 weeks. So a majority of the year, you don't have to actually physically be on site, provided you study. And so we used to travel a lot, and we loved the Maldives. But in those days, it was, as you might know, it was dominated by 2 nationalities, the Germans and the Italians. And it was not just one resort, one nation. It was one resort, one tour operator. So you had the Neckermann Island, the LTU Island, the Tui Island. And so the standards were very simple. Everything came in a tin, including the peas and the vegetables and the peach, for dessert. It was like being back in school.
It was organized the German way.
Sorry?
It was organized the German way.
Right, a little bit. And then they were using salt water for showers and toilets. And that wasn't treated. That was washed back into the lagoon and the sea or affected the water table. Because the budgets were so low, and what the developers were given was so little to develop, as they didn't have any capital. The capital would come from the Neckermann or the TUI advance. So TUI would give a 10-year bed contract with an 80% guaranteed occupancy, and they'd pay 3 years in advance. And that's what would really build hotels in the Maldives. That's really how they're financed. So they were taking from the reef to build the houses. So the standards were not great. They weren't terribly driven towards sustainability. There was no respect for the environment. And I can understand that, because if you come from the Maldives and you have this every day, and you're not passionate about the ocean, you might not respect what you see. So, for example, in the Maldives, which is quite interesting, for a country surrounded by beaches, there's no word for beach. The literal translation of beach is there where you throw the rubbish, because that's what it served. Their rubbish, their waste was organic in the past, the banana or the coconut or the fish bone, and that's what the beach was referred to. So if you come from that background, you don't respect the environment. Of course, we came from a completely different context. We arrived there in the Maldives and we felt, well, this is a pity. It's a beautiful destination, amazing geography. And Eve and I personally felt that we'd lived there previously. We believe we've had many lives together. And when we came there was something funny. We felt that we'd had a life there before. There was more than just appreciating a holiday destination. So we said, well, let's try and do something different that's more sensitive. And because we came from a different context, it was easy for us to understand what holiday makers would like. You know, the fact that the environment was why people were traveling 12 hours to get there. You know, the beautiful jungle, preserving the jungle, not cutting the trees down when you develop, working around the trees for building one's villas, thinking about conservation, conserving the turtle. The turtle was under great stress at the time, and was some species were close to being marginalized. The shark, campaigning against that and protecting that. So that's, and that was quite successful. People liked what we did, our sensitivity to the destination, and then it just evolved from there. So that started in '95 with the one hotel. People would then approach us to ask us to manage their hotels, and that's really how Six Senses evolved, where people would say, well, we were starting to win a lot of awards. We were also doing a few things that were different. So our focus, because we didn't come from a traditional hotel background, we weren't hoteliers, our focus was on the leisure traveler and the fact that people were looking for unique experiences. And today that sounds commonplace, but in those days it was quite alien. So your traditional hotelier came from a corporate background. Their main clients were businessmen, living in, you know, going on business to Paris or London or New York or whatever. And so they were dealing with the corporate hotelier. And so that's what they were delivering, was a product that was efficient for someone who's on business. And they would then come to a resort destination and do the same. So the Jakarta Hilton and the Bali Hilton were very similar at the end of the 80s or 1990, early 90s. There was no difference. And so our focus on the experience, like that's what made us realize that we had to create spas and create a spa brand within Soneva, the Six Senses Spa, because we realized that was an important part of the experience. And and so that's why, you know, people like what we were doing, and that's how we evolved from the one hotel.
Now, listening to you, obviously, the ecological values have a big impact on you. How do you implement those values within your management structure and your employees? Because obviously, you living them and you creating them is one thing, but for your management and your staff to recreate that on the customer every day, how do you do this?
Yeah. So how do we create our values and how do we inculcate our hosts with our values and our beliefs? It's very important, and you touched upon an essential point on what I believe is part of our success is being able to do that and having consistent values. So in the early days, I was when we started on this venture in 1990, I was 26 in 1991. So we opened Soneva Fushi when I was 30. So I was quite young, had limited experience of managing, leading people. And in the early days, that was precisely our challenge. People thought we were mad. They thought the environment thing was mad. Quite a lot of people, including general managers, would join us because of our luxury aspirations.
You create something outstanding. The question is, can you create something as outstanding as you did without being mad?
Right. Well, it was outstanding because it was different at the time. And yes, and our thinking was a bit different. That's right. But what's happened is over time, people have seen what we've done. We've built a reputation for that. So we've started to attract like-minded people. But coming back to the core of your question is how do you get people to share your beliefs and values? And so my real title is, you know, officially it's CEO and joint creative director. But if you look at my business card, that's in brackets. And the big part of my title is guardian of the culture. I believe strongly that the key job of a CEO, and my key job, is to create a culture. Culture in terms of values, philosophies, beliefs. Language is very important. So, for example, we don't have 350 employees at our hotels. We have 0 employees. We have 350 hosts. You can imagine going to a hotel where there are 350 hosts, or a hotel where there are 350 employees. It's completely different. So we actually have a dictionary with 500 Soneva words, which a new host might find a bit confusing, but over time they get used to it and they start talking the language, and the language drives the behavior. And so that's how we've managed to drive this behavior amongst our hosts. Firstly, continuing to be quite clear on our philosophy and our values and our beliefs, repeating them again and again and again, driving language that also drives behavior. And over time, we've developed a reputation which has attracted like-minded people. And you know, to emphasize this point, I was at a conference, a luxury conference last year, 2 years ago, Financial Times conference on luxury. And there was the CEO of a luxury brand, and he said, we were talking about sustainability. And he said, oh, yes, I've hired a sustainability officer. So sustainability is going to be important to us. And I sort of chuckled inside, because sustainability has to come from the heart of the organization. All the C-suite need to believe it. You know, at Soneva, our CFO is passionate about sustainability. He was very successful in the city. He then retired. He set up an NGO. I met him as a 14-time Soneva enthusiast who stayed with us 14 times. And he was, he offered to help us with our Soneva Foundation initiatives and how we could spend the Soneva Foundation money more wisely. So that's our CFO. Our chief commercial officer is vegan, and, you know, has very strong environmental beliefs. So that it's not just hiring a sustainability officer, it has to come right from the pores of the organization. And I think when you can do that, when you can have a purpose that your hosts believe in and start to accept, which goes beyond just paying your employees a salary and enriching shareholders like Ava and I and our partners. When you can have a purpose that has a meaning beyond that, it can be very engaging. And I believe that's done well for us, yeah.
Giving this company the benefit of the doubt, at least they have started, and maybe, just maybe, because you started the idea of sustainability and luxury, bringing it together, maybe this company is going the right way. At least they have started and they're looking at it. You know, things have changed tremendously back in Europe and in the States, you know, and sustainability today is no longer not sexy. You're not sexy if you're not sustainable. Now, Corona has, and fortunately no interview without Corona those days. Corona has changed the world, or is changing the world. Yeah. What impact does this crisis have on your future strategy, particularly when it comes to the learning factor? You know, we all learn from this. And what is your take on Corona, and how do you go forward?
Yeah, I completely agree with what you said, what you just said about every crisis has a learning. And I love the Chinese word for crisis. It's 2 characters. One character is danger, which obviously one has to protect against, and the other is change and opportunity. And we've looked on this crisis like other crises in that way. Handle the danger and then consider the changes that are going to take place and the opportunities. And I like the words of Lao Tzu, good fortune has its roots in disaster. I had a personal health crisis 2 years ago, and that approach and that attitude was extremely helpful to me. And this approach has been extremely helpful for us, our hosts. And I think we've learned a lot from it. We've learned, firstly, the leopard shows its spots during a crisis. We've been fortunate in that most of our hosts have behaved extremely well. Some have showed their spots, and so we know who we can count on. I think as a team, we're much closer together. We've gone through this, we've survived. We in many ways have survived better than a lot of others. So we've commanded a lot of respect amongst our hosts here, whose family members work in other resorts where they're now redundant. So I think that's been good. We've also realized what our priorities are. and what we need to focus on. And I think also this idea of being both the owner and the operator has helped us a lot. We've been able to be nimble and move quickly.
How have your priorities changed? I'm really curious.
How has our
priorities changed? You just said...
yeah, sure. How have our priorities changed? Well, firstly, we're much more focused on where we can add value, properties where we can add value. So in terms of our expansion, we're very clear on where we want to go. We're turning down opportunities that we might have said yes to before. We see wellness being more important. So with Six Senses, when we sold, more important, yeah, absolutely. So when we sold Six Senses, we didn't abandon wellness, but we delegated wellness because part of the transaction was that the spas would be run by Six Senses for a couple of years. So we focused on other aspects, the food and beverage experience. We're now going back to wellness. So Soneva Jani, when we complete Chapter 2 is a doubling of the resort with, when I say doubling, it's another extension. It will have the largest 1- and 2-bedroom water retreats in the world. It's another 27 unique villas. It's a very large lagoon, to put it into context. It's 6 kilometers from one end to the other. So we have the space and the privacy. So we'll be adding that. And with Chapter 2, we're adding a second wellness center. So we have the existing spa resort, and the new addition will be a wellness center, plus a cross-functional training area. So we're increasing the overall focus on wellness at our resort. We will eventually take over the spa here, but also our entire resorts are about wellness and well-being. It's not just what happens at the spa. So for example, and they also combine with sustainability goals as well. So for example, at Soneva Fushi, our beef consumption is reduced by 90%. And that's been for 2 reasons. Beef is the second biggest contributor to global warming after the built environment. It accounts for 20% of greenhouse gases. And secondly, it's much healthier for you. We know that beef causes inflammation. It lowers your immunity. In this time of COVID, we want to reduce inflammation and increase our immunity. So plant-based restaurants. So every Soneva now has a plant-based restaurant, apart from Soneva Jani. Soneva Jani's plant-based restaurant will be completed by the middle of October. So every Soneva has a plant-based restaurant. Beef consumption is reduced by 90% in the last 12 months and will continue. Dairy, white flour, sugar, white processed sugar, all of these are KPIs which the team are driving to reduce. 33% of our menus on the non-plant-based restaurant, which is 100% plant-based, are plant-based as well. So the whole resort is thinking about plant-based food, healthier food, improving health, not just what happens in the spa. Sleep concepts and programs, sleep chocolates. There's quite a lot of those sort of ideas as well.
Sonu, you'd be happy to hear, for the first time in Germany, we start the 101 Best Hotels. It's an award which is given at the Adlon in Berlin this year in November. And one of the main focuses is on sustainability. So there's no hotel which has a chance to come in the top 10, which is not really focusing on sustainability. I trust quite at the level your hotel is and your resort is, but they have started and they're on the way. So I'd like to extend a welcome. If you by any chance are in Germany in November, I'd be delighted to have you as my guest. Thank you very much for your time and for sharing your vision and for sharing your values with us, because that's really what drives us. And we need visionary people like yourself to be one step ahead of all of us so we can follow, or we can at least lean on your experience. It's really great. I look forward to see you one day in person, and I really am happy to have the opportunity to talk to you.
Well, thank you, Carsten. And I think with sustainability, it's an ongoing process. So I liken it to an onion, where you're continuously peeling off a layer of the onion, and then there's a new layer beyond. And we found that in our 25-year journey, we're always discovering new things. So even in the last 2-3 years, there've been new initiatives which we've started, which we could never have imagined 25 years ago. whether it's our management of mosquitoes, for example. We've just, in the last 12 months, we eliminated spraying of chemicals because we found that the mosquitoes were developing a resistance anyway. And we introduced these buckets. So it's like these big 500 of these big plastic buckets with a net in it. We have a sachet. It smells like a boxing glove or a gym shoe. And so that it's essentially lactic acid, which human beings excrete. And the mosquitoes are rather blind. They're not that, they can't see so well, so they follow their scent. So between that and CO2, we take baking powder and sugar, put in a bottle with a pump, and that creates like a live human being as far as the mosquito is concerned. And we caught it last year when we started, we were catching 9,000 mosquitoes a day, 9,000. Now we're down to about 40 or 50. So it's a greater than 97% reduction. So that's the perfect example where the more sustainable approach, not the toxic spraying, has made a dramatic reduction. It's the greatest reduction in mosquito population in a 12-month period ever. And I think that will have impacts well beyond our shores. And we have a few people like the Gates Foundation are now tracking what we've been doing here as an example. So these things happen all the time. Our next project is extensive coral propagation, but using 5 pillars of propagation, 3D printing, carbon paint on the 3D printing, assisted evolution, etc. So there's always new things happening all the time. We've adopted 3 islands locally to eliminate single-use plastic with three pillars: reduce, inspire, and recycle.
Sounds like you're not stopping.
Yeah, no, always new ideas and new initiatives for the team because we're all passionate about what we do. Yeah, thank you.
So, no, I hope we have time to talk about it. I'd like to propose 2 things, although I can't confirm them, but I've spoken to Caroline about this. One is I'd like to use parts of this interview for one of the leading financial newspapers in Germany. It's not confirmed an interview, but at the same time, we certainly will do a write-up on it because we are excited about your drive and we're excited about what you have created. So thanks very much for the opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Nice to speak to you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much for organizing this.